So we're just taking a second look at Flight Sim. Again, we're focusing pretty much on the environment here, and starting out in Southern California, an area I looked at in the previous video. I did get that wrong. I did say this wasn't an area that was likely to have seen special attention. In fact, it is one of the areas that has seen special attention, Long Beach in particular, and out towards Riverside. We're starting off around Fullerton again. I'm looking just at very low level. We're at less than 1,000 feet here, and you know, we're getting such a fantastic sense of presence even at this low altitude. And now this scenery is done in a very peculiar way, something we haven't really had before, and you know, begins to show when you get any lower than this to the ground. This scenery is auto-generated, but in a different way than we're used to. This is some sort of artificial intelligence algorithm is taking the mapping data and creating 3D objects pretty much automatically. And what that does is it gives us these very crinkly, odd, kind of irregular shapes that look fantastically detailed and realistic from a sufficiently high altitude, and by which I mean, you know, more than about 500 feet, and looks so much better than the kind of bland rectilinear autogen that we're familiar with. Now the caveat to that is when you get down to actually to ground level, it looks bizarre. It looks just twisted, but of course we don't see it from ground level, and from this level it's just, you know, the effect is astonishing really. This is just coming over Fullerton Airport. So again, just flying low over these neighbourhoods, we've got, I guess some of those buildings are regular autogen. You know, we don't know the process by which this stuff gets placed. I guess around the airport there's a certain manual intervention has taken place. So we've headed off down to the southwest a little way, and we're approaching Disneyland. Now again, this is just a fantastic representation. You know, we're 1,000 feet here overhead, and it's not too far off being completely photoreal. Those individual rides are distinguishable, and you know, all those water features and so on, they just look fantastic. You know, if you scrutinize it obviously too closely, the seams begin to show. But you know, bearing in mind that we'll never be this low, generally speaking. I mean, it's illegal to be this low over Disneyland at the moment, but you know, that's not the point. The point is that flying overhead at a couple of thousand feet, this is pretty much as real as it gets. You know, it just gives a fantastic impression. And this whole area of Southern California appears to be done with this sort of technology. We're heading over here to Anaheim Stadium as well, next door to Disneyland. And again, you know, we've got the freeways there. We've got, I'm not familiar with most of what's out here, but just look at those on ramps to the freeways, the traffic on the freeways. Again, we're very low here. Normally we wouldn't be this low, but even this low, it's convincing. And that stadium, and that's the LA River, which I think is a flood control system. But the stadium is, I mean, I don't know what this looks like at ground level, but that's just, you know, the level of detail there. Again, it's just astonishing. And you can pretty much read I can't quite read the sign there, but that's, you know, that's it could barely be more detailed. So here's a different kind of scenery. This is flying out of Manchester Airport in the UK, where again we're pretty low. We're about 2,000 feet here, and this scenery is generated in a more conventional way, I suppose, but it's still fantastically detailed. It's much more along the lines of the Orbix True Earth scenery. So we've got photoreal terrain generated from actual mapping data and populated with regular autogen, so foliage and buildings. But the effect is, again, it's just astonishingly real. Even with the slightest overlay of weather conditions which we've got here, we've got just one of the default schemes with few clouds, and again, those are real places down there, and you could easily navigate visually from maps over this, and the effect is just and again the performance, it's not just the effect. If I tried flying true Earth in P3D, it'd just be impossible. And so this is that same vicinity, but if we take it down almost to the ground, so we're less than 1,000 feet here. This is about the same height as we were flying over Disneyland. The effect hasn't diminished appreciably. The difference is, if you are intimately familiar with this area, I guess there's going to be certain concessions to generic appearance in those buildings. Those buildings won't be quite what you would see, whereas flying over Disneyland and Anaheim Stadium in particular, they were pretty much 3D photoreal representations of what's actually there. But this is still, just fantastic to fly over. So we're just looking at some more examples of, I suppose, generic scenery out there in the world. We're flying up the Skagit Valley here. Again, this is I'm looking at places which are familiar to me from the other sims. So this is familiar from Orbic's PNW, Pacific Northwest scenery. Also, there's a True Earth version now. We've flown out of Concrete Municipal. We're flying up the Skagit River towards Skagit Regional, but also Israel's farm. And again, this is just, this is amazing looking scenery. I mean, we've got the weather overlay as well here, so we're flying into fog. But just looking down there, it's that's generic only in the small detail. So the buildings will be generic autogen buildings, but everything's generated from mapping data. And one of the things I wanted to just demonstrate here is, the detail in some sense goes all the way to ground level. So we're going to just pick a field down there, and we're going to put it down and see how that looks. I mean, if you've done this, you can do this off airport landings in FSX and prepared, but when you get below a couple of 100 feet, it's rubbish really. It looks terrible regardless of whether you've got photo scenery, land class scenery. So we're looking for something different here. There's some nice sandbars down there which we might try landing on later, but for now we're going to pick I haven't quite picked out the field yet. I mean, this is genuinely the case. I could land in any of these fields. We won't do this as a dead stick landing. I've got the engine if I need it, but I think pretty much one of those two long fields off the left wing now, maybe that far one with the water pool at the far end. So we're just setting up a bit of a pattern here. I don't have a lot of experience of putting this aircraft down yet with these controls in this sim. That's just my it's my pre-warning that this is going to be a dodgy landing. So bring it round, put some flaps down as we need them, and those trees are nice, all a bit samey, but that road looked a little bit undetailed. But see what's happening here. As we come down and we get close to the ground, you can see that 3D foliage is starting to appear on the field, and that's just giving us an amazing sense of presence. And there's also and it's more than that. I mean, so we got that's genuinely 3D grass or scrub, and we've got all these kind of pock marks, and we've got genuine terrain here, up and down. I have to say we can taxi over this terrain pretty much without limit. So we're not going to, although it's bumpy, this is my experience to date, we're not going to fall into holes. And so maybe there's a threshold beyond which if there's too big a step or hole, it's detected as a crash. You certainly get crashes when you touch the trees on the way out, which you don't in prepared. So that's, it's actually much more meaningful. We'll take off in a second. It's much more of a big deal that you clear the trees on the way out. I mean, in prepared or FSX, you can just, if it's a marginal departure, you can just fly through the trees. Now, the other thing to note is it's not clear to what extent any of this is persistent. So if I were to come down and land in this field again, I suspect it wouldn't look the same. It would be generically the same, but these particular bald patches and hummocks that we're seeing, they'd probably be in different places. And the other thing that remains to be seen is to what extent, if I land in 20 different fields, I get 20 different views. I suspect that they're all going to look pretty much like this. Maybe there's some concession to seasonal colouring. I haven't checked that out yet. Now notionally we'd be doing a soft field takeoff technique here, and we can do that. We can keep the nose wheel up and then fly it through the ground effect to build speed, but as far as I can tell, we don't need to do that. We're not going to snap anything off just by steamrolling through those rough patches on the way out. But all in all, this idea that we can do an off-airport landing and it feels much more realistic, I think that's a fantastic addition. So we're going to fly on down the river in the direction of Israel's Farm, if you're familiar with this area. And Israel's Farm does appear on the GPS. So we're going to see how, in fact it's probably under that fog, so we may not get to see much of anything. So if we take a look down to the left here, I should say in passing we're getting quite a good experience of a realistic fog, in terms of the slant visibility, but we're coming out of that fog bank just in time. If you look down to the left there, again, familiar sight if you're used to this vicinity in Orbix land. That's Israel's Farm, pretty much in the vicinity of Israel's Farm. At least those long sheds are very distinctive, and actually the strip is right below us, just behind the strut. Well, it's gone below the strut now. Let's crank it over and take a closer look. So that's Israel's Farm, just below the left wing, and just coming ahead of the strut now is the chicken field, which is next door to Israel's Farm. We're not going to try and put it down here, I think, today, but just the fact that those two airports are there. They're unretouched airports. There's no detail on the ground. I think there's a couple of generic buildings down there. I guess what we're seeing is this idea that Orbix will be out of business in terms of airport construction. We're immediately seeing that's a fallacy. A lot of these airports are actually there, but they're barely there. There's still a market for. As we're seeing, Orbix is already releasing, as are other developers. I may buy Darrington. That was one of the first, in fact, the first Pacific Northwest strip released. So I might buy that. That's out for Flight Sim 2020, and we'll see how that does. I haven't gone and looked at Darrington in the default configuration as yet. I have looked at concrete. Municipal, again, it's there. It's an airport. It's got some buildings and so on. It's not great at ground level, but and Orcas Island is out as well, so we'll be getting that, no doubt. It's one of my favourite airports. So all in all, this sim is standing up to scrutiny. Second look hasn't taken the edge off how impressed I am with certainly the environment, and as a platform, as I've said, this is going to change the game. We need the third parties to step up. They're already doing that, certainly with the scenery. and I have no doubt that that's going to be amazing. It's the aircraft that we want to see next. I don't know what's in development. I don't know how long development is going to take to filter through in terms of aircraft. Aerosoft is working on the Twin Otter. I say the Twin Otter, it's a ground up rewrite, they assure us, not a port, and it's well underway. So, hopefully that's going to see the light of day before too long. And whether or not I stick with that in the long term, given some of the things I've said about my reservations in terms of the depth of simulation, as a stopgap, as something as a sort of home aircraft that I'm familiar with, to try and work out the bugs of hooking up the controls and so on, that'll be fantastic. So hopefully they'll get that out. Maybe I can get on the beta test for that. But yeah, we'll see. There'll be more to come on FS 2020.